Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Lab. I'm here with Piotraschke. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Frank, welcome.
Is the running gag of all my podcast appearances that nobody can really pronounce my name. It's Piotraschke, that's why I usually say Frank is okay. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Well, congrats on your amazing run with SoSafe. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself to the audience. Who are you? What do you do?
Thanks. Hello to the audience. I am Frank. I am CRO at SoSafe, but usually introduce myself first as a family father. I'm from Cologne, soon to be father of three, and trying sort of to have that role as I have the other roles in a good and well-balanced way. I'm now 3.5 years here at SoSafe. You gave it away a little bit. We had a good growth story so far. The company growth has been amazing over the last couple of years. I'm managing the go-to-market department today. We have roughly 4,500 clients in the space of cybersecurity awareness trainings, or also, as we call it nowadays, human risk management. So we help companies prevent against cybercrime and attacks with preventing basically the employees to click on the wrong emails, helping them understand how they can identify it. We simulate phishing attacks. We have e-learnings for that, we run these products in this market segment. The average customer is mid-market customer. You can guess that from the number of customers that we serve. The whole market is the DACH market. We expanded into the European markets as of recently. An average deal for us is something between 10 and 20 K. We have some smaller, some bigger. We have an enterprise play, and we have also an SMB play. We have an incredibly wide ICP because basically every company that has an email access can be hacked and therefore needs to be protected. That's what we are, and that's what I'm allowed to do here for, as you said, more than 3 years already. The company grown in the meantime also to more than 400 employees. We're doing well in the given sort of the crisis that is currently happening in the SaaS industry. We're still doing incredibly well, as the problem is still very, very big. Before I was here, I happened to do a similar job at Staffbase, which is HR scale up from Chemnitz. Most people will know it. I was allowed to do the same thing there for 2.5 years, and before that, I worked at Optimizely, which was a marketing technology that we sold for A/B testing, marketing optimization, experimentation. So basically, 3 different verticals in the last couple of years.
Fantastic. Today's topic is basically trying to understand your lessons learned scaling those companies. And I'm super curious. I mean, having seen that scale up phase now multiple times, what's one of the biggest challenges in that phase for you?
So I don't know any other phase, right? So there's always the phase where I was present. I never founded anything, so I have a lot of respect for founders and sort of to doing the early steps, which was never something that I could help with. I usually came in as the first sort of sales leader, and the products that I was entitled to sell were always very different. We were focusing on different market segments. We had different types of technology. It was focused on different segments. So sometimes we have an enterprise play, as we did at Optimizely or even AT Internet, where I was working before. Staffbase also very much sort of focused on the enterprise space. Here at SoSafe, it's a mid-market play, more a volume play. So very different. And I think one of the biggest flaws or the biggest pitfalls that I would identify is if you're growing fast and if you sort of scale up fast, it's so hard to find a pattern that you can sort of evolve on. Finding data sets that really are comparable. I have sort of the notion that I say every year here, we are in a completely different company, with different people, with also different products. Yes, we still serve the same problem and we're still trying to solve the same things. But as a company, you can assume that a 40 people company or a 400 people company is a different beast, right? So you're trying to analyze account setups and different forecasting notions, different sort of setups with SDRs, AEs, but you find your SDRs from the past already in the leadership side on the other side. So you can never really sort of compare what you did in the past with what you want to do in the future. It's incredibly hard, and I think it can be very risky if you try to do so. So that was for me one of the big learnings, that data analysis is super important. I've done it all my career long, and I've a gazillion tools that will help me on the way to do that. But you still have to be always sort of having this entrepreneurial mindset. This okay, what are we trying to do? What is the hypothesis? What are we trying sort of to solve here? And yes, look at the data, but not only, but also looking a little bit more ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think at Fiber, my previous company, we said change is the only constant. I mean, how do you then make sure that you kind of onboard new talent? And like, I mean, I think part of that scale up phase is always that you hire, more experienced folks into the company. I mean, how do you do that at SoSafe and also other places?
So as I said, we grew in a pretty short amount of time from, let's say, 40, 50 people to 400. Obviously, you cannot only do that with people that have solved the problem that you are trying to solve with them. But in key roles, we always try to find somebody that has seen good and knows how good looks like. Not necessarily to have somebody that has mastered exactly the same challenge, but at least sort of was part of a setup that saw the solution. At the same time, if you think about what I said before, that everything is always and ever changing, there is a lot of uncertainty and instability in such a growth setup already. If you bring in then outside talent, basically with a predefined or predetermined playbook, it's probably still an accelerator for sometimes even this instability. So you need to be very careful how to inject this talent at what level, how to sort of take the experience that you actually want to have, but at the same time, what is the thing that you want to hold on to that you now so carefully build up and seems to grow and seems to work, and not change all of this, right? So even if it's maybe sometimes against what the person or the person that you're hiring is telling you or have seen at other places not work so much, where if you know something that you can distill from sort of the ever-changing flows that works well, hold on to it, right? So this is and trying to get even stronger on it.
So is that like, if I would join SoSafe today, like I know that most leaders, right, they I mean, the length of being in a position isn't that long, right? 12 to 18 months. So I want to be very quick to make decisions and get going. Do you proactively ask them not to, and basically just, or like, how do you do it, right?
I'd say we're trying to give people a clear understanding of what we are and how we do, and have a clear playbook, have guardrails basically that help people understand where they can be more creative. Obviously, we try to hire smart people to also buy their creativity and sort of their also activity. I mean, we're in sales, so therefore activity is something that we value a lot. And we also, depending where you would enter the company, we would expect you sort of to be active very, very soon, because on the other side is, and that's also one of the biggest learnings I made through the course of my career. Time is of the essence, right? So you're always valued or measured against the current quarter and the next one, right? So all long-lasting plans that you're making are counting nothing if you don't manage to deliver against sort of your short-term targets. And that's true for the entirety of our organization. That's what we're trying to hold also ourselves accountable for. So therefore, every new joiner, we're trying also to give a chance sort of to score quickly against whatever target we give them, right? So whatever sort of the objective is, make sure you have the chance sort of to have an impact against that, so that you also get this feeling of, okay, I need something to be impactful here, and we're trying to give people that chance. So it's a little bit of both, right? Trying to have a very good onboarding, learning what we are and how we do, but at the same time asking for activity.
Yeah, yeah, love this. I mean, another area of change is pipeline generation. So I want to switch gears a bit. I mean, there's, this whole debate is, outbound dead, and I mean, I personally, kind of always laugh at this because I think it's such a stereotype discussion, but obviously it's a discussion around also the unit economics of it, right? So super curious, how do you generate pipeline at SoSafe today? What is working? What is not working? What has changed? And what are your thoughts on pipeline generation?
Yeah, if there's one constant in my career, at least since I've worked at Optimizely, where I basically learned about sort of the whole concept of SaaS flows and pipeline generation versus conversion rates, and sort of trying to have a very transparent perspective of your whole go-to-market flow. I learned how important pipeline generation is, and I can say I've seen conversations around it changing a lot, and hearing that outbound is dead and you should do more focus on revenue marketing and whatever sort of the terms are that are used. I have to say, maybe it's my age and my ignorance. I think sort of what worked well at Optimizely and even before, what helped us at Staffbase and still help us here at SoSafe is a high activity level. However you want to translate that, is it sort of outbound calls? Is it outreach? It comes a little bit more also on the strengths of the individuals, but there is a baseline that we know that you should not sort of go below, which is a certain activity level, and that helps us in generating outbound pipeline. We rely heavily on outbound and inbound pipeline. We have a pretty good mix. We also nowadays believe we have a good understanding of who our customers are, how we can engage them, and where to find them, basically. But I firmly believe if you want to control your own destiny, that was always the notion that we used at Optimizely. If you want to control your own destiny, then you need to be active, and you need to sort of find your customers and engage with them, and explain them what you do. And if they're not coming to you, and usually that's not the situation that all scale-ups are, or even startups are, that people not finding them, you need to find them. That's how you do.
Yeah. And I mean, what's the split right now, inbound, outbound for SoSafe?
It's half, and it's ever competing. Who's the winning half, right? So sometimes it's inbound, sometimes it's outbound. I think we upscaled our outbound, which is probably one of the hardest things to upscale inbound. Because there's only so much, and there's usually only so much money you can invest in it, and that's where you very quickly, when you scale up fast, start injecting more outbound capabilities, because it seems sort of from a cost of revenue perspective being more controllable. But we managed also to upscale and to scale the inbound in a similar fashion, even though the numbers are ever increasing, right? So you can assume sort of with the growth rates, et cetera, that you're trying to hit, the pipeline generation numbers are ever increasing. And that's hard if you only have the sort of the inbound marketing channels in front of you that you know. So you have to expand in channels, you have to try out new things. So we still have a pretty healthy mix of half, added obviously by upsells and a little bit of channel and partnerships. But I'd say the big two buckets are inbound and outbound.
And if you think about the shift to efficiency, right? Like, are those channels equally efficient, or do you have like a general efficiency metric for pipeline generation? No.
We do, and they are ever competing with their efficiency. Our outbound is actually pretty efficient, and you can obviously argue how successful, and that's obviously what my marketing friends always would say. Yeah, outbound can only be so successful. Our inbound campaigns, our branding is so good, and I can see that there's some truth in it. The salespeople in me will always say, "I don't know." But I can see sort of the relevance of a strong brand for outbound, obviously. I'd always say it needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because we're in B2B. We're still tiny for sort of, if you compare us with brands on the market. But I'd say it's it's still sort of competing. I'd still say, depending what you look at, an inbound lead is not an inbound lead, right? So the hand raisers that we are generating are super efficiently to be closed. If you are more thinking about sort of top of funnel leads that we're then nurturing and we're driving through the whole thing, and then in the end you need SDRs to translate them into opportunities. That's where the efficiency is probably a little bit lower than a pure outbound. So it's matters, but what I understood, or at least I tell myself, also in this efficiency debate, is you always have to balance where you need to go. And unfortunately, or fortunately, in the setups that I was working always, you can't really argue the AR target. It's not really for debate, right? So it's not really, yes, we need to be efficient while doing it. And we obviously need to sort of be mindful of the money that we're spending for it. But you very quickly come to the conclusion, you need all these channels to work. You cannot just focus on one of it or two of it, and because they seem to be more efficient. The discussions that we always had here, if we have like channels that are not yet that efficient, it's not to switch them off, but how do we make them more efficient? Because we need the pipeline that they generate.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole topic around marketing attribution is a huge challenge, right? Like how much, is brand awareness driving inbound, right? Specific leads, and then also outbound, and how is outbound helping the inbound, maybe MQLs that are not high intent then actually convert into opportunities. And then how do you track that end to end, against your close won, close lost, win rates, opportunity cohorts, and so on, right? I think it is in general really, really challenging. But to your point, right, and I think that's really interesting because there's so we're gonna record a session with Jaco from Winning by Design, and I think there's this whole notion around like, okay, the first 10 million, you should just have one motion and one channel, and ideally, scale that. And I think when I talk to people in the field, right, like doing day to day, I would say it's a lot more complicated. But I'm curious, what's your take on that?
So, it's interesting. I love Winning by Design and the whole concept around it. I'd still sort of, in my experience, I only can talk about the places where I was. If you're really on a scale-up path and you mastered sort of to find the product market fit, and you're bold, and you have the guts to do it, and you really sort of want to double down, accept that there may be failure on the other side, then the 0 to 10, as everybody is talking so much about, is an 18-month, depending where you start, right? Look at where I usually started. I started around sort of let's say the 1 to 3 million phase, right? So that's usually when I came. So when you envision sort of where you are and sort of the setup that we had, the 3 to 10 is basically usually in a best case scenario a 1 year that you have, right? So that's what you sort of are talking about. And I think sort of you need to do two things. You need to make sure you hit the 10, or at least come close to them in this given year of, let's say, 18 months. And at the same time, there's the next year coming, and you need to build something that you will then be able to scale up. And I think it's incredibly hard if you don't. I mean, I talked about sort of the thing is ever changing, but at the same time, you build some learning expertise about sort of how do you run an inbound marketing, how do you do outbound. If you started at a later time, it's like a muscle you're trading up from zero, and I think that's a risk. I would never do that, even though I would always encourage people, if you found something that works well, double down on it and become really good at it. Yeah, I still say, at least sort of that's my learning. If you really want to sort of scale something up to 10 and beyond, you need to understand that you probably need a little bit wider mix along the way, and you can't just sort of ignore the channels that don't work today for you entirely. You have to see the mix in it, and you probably have to sort of expand your reach and your expertise on it.
Yeah. I sometimes think of like channels almost as like new product or like units, right? Like you basically you're able to unlock another complete growth driver. And I think the notion is also that in this time, right, you shouldn't do something where you need maybe 18 months to prove it, and you double down on it and you invest in it, but there's no clear view on that. And I think that's like also a winning by design idea that is floating around right now. And I fully subscribe to that. I think that makes a lot of sense in the times we're in. It's very risky, right? So doubling down on what you know works, but then, already foreseeing the next and the following year to essentially be set up correctly. And I don't know how you see this, but it's usually not the case that you say, okay, now I do channel, and then 6 months later, 40% of your pipeline is channel, right? That's just not how the world works usually.
And you picked also sort of the part which is for me the most tricky one to get running, which is the channel, because it has the biggest delay to revenue, right? So because you have so many players in between and so many very costly exercises that you have to understand. Therefore, I would always have a prioritization while doing it, right? So if you have something going that is working well, which is usually the place where I would start, is sort of the SDR AE setup, trying to find sort of a good setup with that, marketing, supplying some inbound. That's if you found that fundament, and probably that's sort of what also winning by design is populating. If you found that, like, make sure you have that working very, very well, and that gives you probably the fundament to then carefully explore whether channel may be a good part for you. Or while you grow, if you maybe can have a land and expand in a more sort of an upsell notion, or even you find other channels where you have not been in the part in terms of marketing, like if we're trying at the moment with podcast advertising, or with going to Meta, where usually not our playground was in the past, and see if there is something that we can find, because we're rather a little bit wider minded in terms of our ICP. But you need to have this stable, focused engine, so to say, that is good enough for probably 70-80% of your revenue.
Well, glad to hear that outbound isn't completely dead. I think obviously the entire it is always a question of the details, right? Like, how you do it exactly, how your message market fit is, and so many other things. Curious, like, how do you what are the metrics you use to measure pipeline generation health? Yeah.
Pipeline generation health. So we obviously trying to have most people held accountable on pipeline generation. So from marketing to SDRs to AEs even, we have a huge focus on pipeline generation. So also marketing, for example, is not managed by MQLs or anything. They're managed by qualified pipeline as our SDRs. So we basically have this one thing that we're trying to do. And then we have a pretty distinct process that we probably could make 10 times better, because it grew so fast and was gaffer taped 10 times. But we have a pretty distinct process how we create pipeline, and we have some measure points along the way that tells us if we're good. What is the MQL to SQL conversion? We call that handover case. So when is the handover from the SDR to the AE happening? How much time is needed for that? Is it expanding? Is it decreasing? We have different segments that we're selling into. Easiest to understand is t-shirt sizes, SML or even XL, depending on the company size that we're selling into. How long are the durations from one step to the other? Is there are there inflation points that we can observe? Is there all of a sudden a peak in the handover cases, but is not translated into a qualified pipeline? Why is that? And these are the things that we are observing every day.
So the audience can't see this, but I look at Frank here and I see, his operating model in his head, through his eyes, he exactly has it all laid out, and probably can change the assumptions, very quickly. Super cool. And then, what is a qualified opportunity for you?
So we have a very distinct SLA that would define that. So we could pull it up and could show you what are the things that we need to have in an opportunity. And we're pretty old school. I know that MedPIC and MEDIC has been sort of the qualification criteria that everybody's looking for. We are in the SMB space, or let's say the mid-market space. So we still operate mostly by band criteria. I'd say what I've observed mostly in companies is it. For me, it doesn't really matter which qualification criteria you are following, as long as you're really following it well and you take it serious. And that's the hard part. If you look about sort of the bigger size of the team, you have multiple different people that are engaging with customers. They are very different. The buyer journeys that they are on are very different. So trying to hold on to the minimum viable qualification criteria you need in order to not spill over too much revenue on the way because you qualify things out too quickly, but at the same time rule out basically the tire kickers along the way that you don't want to spend your time with. This is what qualification criteria is trying to do, right? So trying to assess whether somebody is in a buyer journey on a certain level that you want to engage with this person. And that's what we still use the band criteria mostly, but in a very sort of distinct personalized way for SoSafe, where we have a couple of other things that we need to have. And there's always sort of a few mandatory things that we need to find and a few things that are sort of nice to have if you discover these.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. And then, I mean, I assume, I mean, you obviously are not only interested in pipeline generation, but actually closing those deals then. I mean, what's the most important step in the sales process for you to close deals? Yeah.
So what I try to do early on in my career is always to find sort of the silver bullet in the end, right? So that closes the deal. And what I learned is there is not such a thing. You lose the deal early on, or you win the deal early on. And then sort of the better you start from the beginning, the easier the whole thing will go. And I think this is also where most people do the biggest mistakes. They have their template sort of going into deals, and they do it every time the same way. And then in the end, in their mind, when the sales cycle ends, the buyer journey has not ended because you maybe missed something along the way. You're extending it because you failed in the beginning to find really sort of the decision maker, the person that probably will be in the end deciding for or against what you're trying to sell. You probably were only engaging with the person that told you that they will make the decision, but you all know that they never will be. And you sort of stay in your comfort zone early on, and then in the end, when sort of you forecasted the deal and you think that you are ready to receive the order form, but the customer is not willing to give it to you, you're trying to figure out why is that? Why what did I miss? But then it's basically too late to then start calling the decision maker because you're trying to get a signature from that person who's really not willing to speak to you at that level. So I think the most important piece is how you start a buyer journey, how you sort of manage in the beginning when the pressure's not that high, when you're still sort of in, first date kind of level, then to find and set up the deal in a good way and to sort of find the decision makers early on, ask them for help, ask them for support is the way better moment to then maybe in the end ask them again for help if it's needed and the deal needs to come. So I think I never found the silver bullet in closing, but I found sort of the better you set up deals from early on. And I know that this is also the attention of all the MEDPIC and qualification criteria that are out there. But I think you need to sort of put it into the mind of the salesperson that this is really important to basically go as multi-threaded as sort of the deal allows it. It depends on the size and the time you have for it. The more you do research there, the more you find the right people, the easier will be the closeout in the end, because it will be then sort of the continuation of the buyer journey.
Yeah. I mean, I think ideally having multiple champions and the right path to power, being multi-threaded, right? Like you don't really control what's being discussed internally, right? It's and usually. Even if you enable your champion very well, it's still hard for them to answer all the specific questions the economic buyer will ask, right? And I think this is, especially right now in this environment, is so important because the power play is going back to the CFO, right? They're basically rationalizing spend on all levels, and they'll ask the hard questions. And the question is, have you enabled your champion to answer them well, or would you rather be in that meeting, right? You would always love to be in that meeting. The question is, can you be in that meeting, right?
And there's some tactics that you can apply in order sort of to help and to be helpful in these phases for the buyer, because they are trying to do the same things. Sometimes you find ways how to support. But I think it starts more sort of also in the head of the salesperson, because what we are trying to observe is usually, are you really identifying what you call the economic buyer, right? So in in our terms is the ATL, the above the line person, sort of that needs to sort of sign off in the end. And usually what we hear a lot is then people saying, yeah, we have identified the person. It's the head of procurement, right? So we know the head of procurement. And we trying to tell people inside and outside of the company that the head of procurement, sorry for all procurement folks, are not deciding anything. Right? So they're not the decision makers. They may be entitled to sign something in the end, but they're not taking any deal. They will not help you close anything. They were installed to not help you close the thing. Right. There's somebody that you don't know that you have to find. But this is sort of, especially when you think about SoSafe and the fast growth that we've had, mostly our sales folks that we all love dearly have not had the experience in other companies and sort of to going through many different jobs, sort of to have this learning. So we need to tell them and educate them on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one other area like I find fascinating is this like kind of the different levels of pain, right, for the people you're talking to, and like I think it's like, and then how well do you actually solve that pain? And I think in general, like for salespeople, this is a really important piece, right? Like, just because somebody, finds something a bit annoying doesn't mean they will change anything. And change always is risky, right? Sure. And so really understanding how you basically map like against that pain, and that pain ideally should be career moving for them. Mm-hmm. And then you help them essentially with your solution to be, and I think that is really something that also develops strong champions and it completely changes the conversation. So early on, understanding, like the setup in depth, the situation, and then also the future state, and really understanding like can we actually help? And then how do you view this like whole like kind of ROI discussion, right? Like, I mean, it's like I hear this now a lot, right? Like, okay, that we need to rationalize the spend, and then people put together a case, and but the highest risk being the case not being really like trusted. Like, do you do that? Like, how do you go about that?
I think we probably have it somewhere. I never, and I reveal myself as a buyer of many tools as well. If I get presented with any ROI cases, I never buy them. I've never seen them in my life sort of to really come to fruition. So therefore, I would not entertain myself too much with those. What we're doing here and what I follow mostly in my career is I follow proactive selling, which is slightly different. And you would try to identify trains on the side of the customer, which is basically sort of the level of pains that you're mentioning. You're trying to find things that are interesting for the person, mostly sort of the decision maker on the other side, and you want to tag yourself on these. And I can very much say the same for myself, right? So if somebody wants to have my attention, they should know what my trains are. What are my sort of importance? What are my important points? What do I have on my table that what I'm trying to solve? And if you show me a solution to a problem that is pretty sizable for me, you have all my attention, and I will probably even buy your product, and it almost doesn't matter what it costs to me, because the impact that it has on my side is so big that almost every cost is allowed for it. So I would always encourage people sort of to not bring in their standard ROI debates and sort of what you could do A, B, and C for you when you don't know what really is important for in your words, economic buyer on the other side, or what is sort of really driving the process on the other side. What are the problems that they're having? What's the pain in your words that you're trying to solve, and try to identify that. And then the interesting piece is also, how do you translate your help to that pain? Because that's the important piece that I usually then fail to understand. I don't know how many people are calling me and saying, hey, AI can solve all your problems. And I'm pretty sure they will. They just didn't identify which one of those are really sort of the ones for the problems that I have. So trying to find really the bridges to this pain, and what is really the right medicine for it, and is really the person that you're talking to has it? Can they explain it to you? This is the tricky part, I feel.
Yeah. Okay, I want to switch gears. I mean, we don't have much time left, so we do this now rapid fire. Like biggest learning, hiring. Going from 40 to 400 people. Like how do you do it? Yeah.
Finding levels. If you look into the setup that we have today, you find people that I have worked at other places with, that I tried to find for the organization at key positions because time was of the essence. We needed to scale fast. Mistakes and failure was not allowed. So you rely mostly on people that you know what to do. And that was one part of the ingredient. And the other part was finding the challengers in the company, finding really the people that want to show that they can be impactful and meaningful, and give them space. So we have a lot of people that we hired on the SDR side or on AE side that have made to managers that are accelerating fast through the company, try to help them make careers. And that is sort of the other side of it. What we're trying to have a huge intake of talent and challenging or people that can survive in challenging environments and that show it and let them grow and give them space is something that we try to do on the hiring side. So trying to have that balance, right? So with experience on one side and then energy, I'd say mostly people with experience can also have energy, but you know what I mean, right? So to still have sort of young, ambitious people that you expose to the task at hand and let them shine. And I think that was the leveling that we did when it comes to recruiting. Loads of junior people have been hired here, have grown so fast. We could see them growing very fast in a fast-paced environment. And our business model is working well with that because reminding, right? So we have the mid-market that we're selling into. The product that we're selling is cybersecurity, but at the same time, it's not highly complicated to explain somebody how a phishing simulation works, how an e-learning against sort of cybercrime and the threats work, how to build resilience, etc., and also the analytics around that. It's not highly complicated, and therefore we were fine of not really sort of going high on the experience scale, at least sort of when it comes to individual contributors.
Yeah. How do you keep that identification when the organization grows and not everybody, right? Like it needs to be ingrained in the organization.
It's tough. I can tell you it's tough, and everybody that can have a look at sort of the I don't know, the reviews about SoSafe can see that we not always mastered it. Growth is painful for people that are in the company sometimes longer. It could be potentially very painful, and there's not one way to avoid that. There's not only the one way sort of to alleviate that for everybody. You have to go through it, and you try to distill the core, and you make it non-negotiable, and other things you will have to leave behind. That's just sort of the learning I did. Sort of culture is usually the word that comes to mind here, and you try and sort of to be very distinct with the culture, and also have moments for the entire organization to reflect on it and saying, look, we've grown now to this size. I know for some of you this is uncomfortable, and I can totally understand if you don't agree to it, but we will not change, right? So we will never sort of, you can imagine we have the debates here all the time. Why are you so aggressive? Why are we trying to grow by that number? Should we not process you sitting in this rocket ship that is sometimes you feel a little bit gaffer tape here and there, but you still sort of think, oh, should we not land and do maintenance and do sort of a little bit more setup? And we say, no, we can go faster, right? So that's go even faster. And this is not for everybody. But you need to sort of be true to that because this is not non-negotiable, unfortunately.
But this is the place where, as if you're young, you will accelerate your career. You will learn faster. You will accelerate your career. Right, I remember this topic about like rippling and basically fun of rippling, right? Like basically saying mid-quarter, like, okay, what can we do to actually double ARR, in the next 6 months instead of just hitting on budget. And I think that is a fantastic mindset, and especially once you found product market fit and you really have it, right, and it's strong. And you see that opportunity, and then why wait, right?
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
It's great to see. I mean, look,
on this is just unfortunately you have to explain people that are sometimes applying for roles that are coming with a lot of corporate background and saying, I would love to work in a scale-up. I would love to work in a small environment because it looks so tempting. I'm in this giant company that I don't know who my boss's boss is. To tell them, this is not the environment for you, even if you think it is. But I've seen it failing so many times. It's just not the environment for most people.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes being very specific in the interview process is like, look, I mean, if you like to work 9 to 5, we're not the right place. It's that simple, right? And it doesn't mean that, we work on Sundays, but, I've actually seen founders doing that, working during weekends with the entire team on the Saturday, which was particularly interesting. But you might know Mario from NPAL, also a fairly large company. His previous company did that, right? And we were like, oh man, that's really crazy with the entire team. But I mean, look, I think it's how do you drive consistency, right? Like, how do you have your operating principles, drive consistency, and then also be very good at who you hire and also not select to join the company. I feel we could go into so many different directions. I don't want to end this, but we unfortunately have to stop it. So I want to ask you 3 closing questions. So first, what's your favorite go-to-market book, or 2 or 3 books you really like?
I'm a terrible reader. I cannot sort of list myself into all these sort of people that are reading sort of 2 books a week. I'm terrible at it.
I mean, you have a family and you have a single house.
I'm reading a lot of those. But there's one book that really changed the course of my career, which was this Proactive Selling by Skip Miller, who also became a friend and mentor to me, and really defined my career. So every new starter here at SoSafe gets a copy of Proactive Selling, and can very much recommend that book. It's very tactical, not very sort of wide here, but very sort of articulate of what you could do, how do you find decision makers, how could you sort of get their attention, etc. It helped me a lot, and it helped SoSafe, I think, also a lot.
So for all the people that are currently wanted to become CROs, what is the increasing likelihood of becoming a CRO in the future?
If you deliver against what you are hired for. There's usually one, I learned it from one of my mentors, Matt Althauser, the former CEO of Amplitude. He was the sales leader at Optimize that hired me at the time. He told me, when I asked him the question, so how does success look like for me? I said, Frank, there was one reason why we hired you. Somebody thought there's a problem, and we decided at the end, Frank will solve it for us every day. Think about it every day, how you can as hard solve it for us as you can, and you can have a great career here. And he called that the nut of the job, and I kept it for myself, and I keep talking about it all the time. And also think about sort of if you decide to work in scale-up land, if you decide to work in a SaaS environment, it is an environment where quarters and short terms matter. You may not like it, but the more you appreciate it and you deliver against every single target, always sort of focusing on the short term, then this will enable you to also think about the long term, but not the other way around.
That's so on point. Okay, one thing that salespeople should change?
I don't know if there's anything that they need to change. I think there's a constant that you probably have to appreciate when you're a salesperson. It's a craft. It's something that requires work, and we requires sort of your input. The more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. And as long as you control it, I can see that with all the high performance that I've ever had in any given setup, the more you appreciate that. It's not the art, it's not sort of the over creativity. It's required, but it's not sort of the point that will make you win. It's the craft, it's the hard work, it's the thing that you put in. The more you control that part, the more you will control the other side.
Well, this is Frank telling us how to get it done. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.